We are born free, and we will die free. The time in between, though, that's complicated. In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom. And, I love my intro. The voice you hear there, that is Dan Smots. Have had it for a couple years now, but I've kind of realized with the direction of the show, it's probably time to change that. So that'll be on the docket of things to do here in the near term. Get a new intro, new voiceover. And it's a changing world we live in. Things are changing so rapidly, so quickly, it's hard to even keep up. So why not change my intro while we're at it? Thank you for being here on a Thursday night as we stream this live to YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Rumble. I'll introduce my guest in just a minute here. We're going to be talking about Trump, obviously, everything around that assassination attempt. We'll be talking about Joe Biden. Now it sounds pretty official that he's going to be dropping out and what comes with that. We're going to be talking about JD Vance. And my guest, Remso Martinez, wrote an awesome article about JD Vance that we're going to get into. And and whatever else comes up, we'll talk about that as well. If you're not subscribed to this podcast, please do so. The Lions of Liberty Network for the full feed with me and Brian and all the other stuff we do. Or just for this show, Finding Freedom with John Odermatt, be sure to subscribe on the podcast platforms and or on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, all the good stuff. Let's get to it. Let's bring Remso in here. Remso Martinez. If you don't know him, you probably know his name from podcasting, political podcasts. Used to be pretty much his focus. He's taken a step back from that, maybe re-entering again here. We'll talk about that. But he's been spending a lot of time on his marketing business. Remso is a marketing expert. He's also an author. He's got his hands in almost everything. So, Remso, welcome back to Finding Freedom.
John, it's been way too long, man. Why don't we ever do a podcast together when things are good in the world? When things are actually nice and fluffy and we can talk about fun shit? Why is it always when we're on the verge of World War III or something?
I don't know, man. I think we actually might be on the verge of things kind of this cycle of craziness may be coming to an end. I kind of can feel that in the air, but I think we got a lot more craziness to get through first between now and November. But hopefully on the other side of that is a little more normalcy. So Remso and I were talking, chatting in DMs over the past couple of days. The original plan for this show was we were going to do a reaction to Donald Trump's RNC speech. We're recording this prior to that on Thursday. If you're watching live, you know that. But I think there's just so much news that it's worthwhile to do this show now. Talk about, the feelings going into that speech and going into the weekend with Joe Biden potentially dropping out of the race, and also crazy new things, but now talking about other theories around this assassination attempt. So let's start off with Joe Biden, and I'll pull this up on the screen. This broke earlier today, that Joe Biden is pretty much official that he's going to be dropping out of the race. So this is a tweet from Mark. I must have Jocko Willink on the brain or something. Mark Halperin. Breaking news, he says multiple sources outline the apparent state of play on Biden at this time. Plans to announce his withdrawal from the nomination as early as this weekend, with Sunday most likely. John Meacham polishing up the remarks. Biden will not resign the presidency. Biden will not endorse Harris. That's pretty surprising. Open convention. That's a shocker. I mean, I did not expect that. What do you think, Remso? Did you see this coming? Is this something that you expected?
It's always one of those things that's within the realm of possibility, but to actually play, it's just wild to think that we've come to this point. In my book, how to succeed in politics and other forms of devil worship, I talk a lot about the 1968 presidential convention in Chicago. And ironically, I'm living in Milwaukee, so the RNC is 15 minutes away from where I live, and the DNC in August will be in Chicago. And what are they expecting? Just like 1968, they're expecting riots. And I think the timing of it is incredibly strange too, because look at the world then and look at the world now. Then they were looking at the riots that were, tied to the Vietnam War and the opposition to U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Now you have the extreme left wing, which is so funny because the left wing is already as extreme as it's ever been before. And what they're trying to go for is trying to get Democrats to stop any support to Israel amidst their war with Hamas and Palestine. Mm-hmm. So for people to think that this is something that's never happened before, there's a whole generation of people that remember the brokered convention of 1968, which gave us Hubert Humphrey, and it ultimately led to, ironically, a Richard Nixon presidency. Now, Richard Nixon had never been president prior to 1968. However, he had served as the vice president for 2 terms under Dwight Eisenhower. He ran against JFK in 1960 and lost that because of weird behavior in Chicago. Hint, hint. People didn't trust where the ballots were moving. And then he tried running for governor of California back when California was a reliably red state. And when he lost that, he went ahead and told the media, you don't have Dick Nixon around to kick around anymore. And then he showed back up later, and Nixon beat Humphrey soundedly. What else is also really weird is that we had a third-party candidate who went ahead and took a pretty big chunk of southern states. That was third-party candidate George Wallace, former Alabama governor. Who do we have right now? We have RFK. And while RFK is not looking for an electoral advantage, he's certainly up to take up to 10% of the popular vote in states such as Wisconsin, Illinois, and others. So I'm looking at this right now and I'm like, oh my gosh, like if history was ever going to repeat, it's not identical, but it certainly does rhyme.
It sure does rhyme. And I just thought of this now. Do you think there's any chance that RFK shows up at the DNC and tries to, because they're saying potentially an open convention, which I, if Biden was going to drop out, I thought that there's no way that they would even try to pass over Kamala, that, because she's, the first black woman to be vice president, you're really risking a lot of your base there if you skip over her and pick someone like a Newsom or Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. So, I mean, is that something that you thought was even possible?
Possible, yes, but does it feel like I, really expected things to go this way? No, it feels weird. To answer your question, do I think RFK will show up? Absolutely. He's already given out some platitudes to the DNC following, all of Bidenisms. And he's already said, listen, like, I'm right here, guys. Like, I will ignore the fact that you just completely rigged the primary. I will ignore the fact that, you've tried to bring up like old, like 20-year-old sexual assault claims. You've tried to say that I ate a dog. You tried, bringing up the fact that I had a worm in my brain and everything else. Like, I'll still take the nomination, but I'm going to run things my way. I think he'll do what he did at the LNC. He'll show up. And if he gets one delegate who's willing to go ahead and give him a floor vote, then he'll take it. I don't think he has anything to lose by going. I certainly think that he doesn't have much more to win because the DNC has made it very clear that they hate him. They absolutely hate him. They've treated him almost as badly as they treated Trump. And I say almost because the main focus has been on Trump, and they have done very little to combat RFK directly. It's mainly been super PACs with dark money that's been going to attack RFK throughout the country. But if he showed up, I think that there would probably be some folks who are panicking, who are like, you know what, we might as well go with this guy. But ultimately, he's not the establishment pick. If he was the establishment pick, they would have allowed him to debate Biden almost a year and a half ago. And what they realized was that you couldn't let that happen, because we would have been able to see very clearly that Biden was not mentally capable of not alone standing on stage next to a man in his 70s who's on like testosterone replacement and does pull-ups for fun randomly, but like coherently, like he's just not there. Cognitively, he's just not there. Imagine if you had Trump, RFK, and Biden on the debate stage a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
He would
wow.
have just been like, "You're not normal these days, are you, Joe?" It just would have been, it would have absolutely solidified it. We'd be having this conversation last month instead of right now.
That
But
the golf challenge would have turned into a push-up contest, and you would have had one of them would have died probably. Probably Joe Biden would have died right on the stage at the debate trying to do push-ups.
we're gonna have to go ahead and see if you can max 50 in 1 minute, Joe. It's just I still predict that RFK shows up. That's one thing I'm definitely gonna say. I think even if, like, let's assume right now, because we're still in the realm of possibility. Let's say Biden just says, no, I'm still gonna go, and it somehow turns into an open convention. I still think he would show up and try just to at least get some media attention. I think that RFK is pretty committed to
Mm-hmm.
going all the way through November, as his own guy, as an independent. But we're dealing with a weird situation right now, and I'm surprised that nobody's really brought this up. I was at secret meetings throughout the last couple of days since I got back from Freedom Fest in Las Vegas on Saturday. I get home, my wife tells me that somebody tried to shoot the president, and I'm like, "Hello, I missed you too." And the last week has just been like nonstop work for me. And I was speaking with some folks who were at the RNC convention in 2012, and it was about the rigging of the RNC to take away Ron Paul's delegates and give them to Romney. Now, the RNC has gone ahead, and there were reforms because of what happened to the Ron Paul delegates, where you keep your delegates, you keep them. And unless you release them, much like Nikki Haley did the other day, where she released her delegates to go to Trump, they're yours. You don't, like, no one can take your delegates from you. Fast forward to 2016. The same situation happened to Bernie Sanders during the race between him and Hillary, where the DNC tried to go ahead and forcibly remove Bernie Sanders delegates, and it almost turned into a fractured convention until Bernie conceded because he's corrupt as shit. But they went ahead and rewrote their rules, much like the RNC did, where the candidate who has the delegates has to release the delegates. So we're in a situation right now where the question going into this is, if Biden actually does say, like, I'm out, he has to release his delegates. If he doesn't, or if he holds on to them, that's going to be kind of an issue. I could see a potential where he puts out this thing where he's like, I'm considering it, but he's going to wait until the convention, because Crooked Joe needs to make sure that his crackhead son is good, that his awkward wife is good, that, his China business dealings and everything are good. I have a feeling that Joe is going to try and form some sweetheart deals where he won't just release delegates. There's no power in just releasing them to go to anybody. What I think is going to happen is he's going to.
I just pulled up on the screen the Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan meme with Nancy Kerrigan standing along the wall and Tanya Harding behind her looking at her with a side eye, and Tanya Harding is the Democrat Party and Nancy Kerrigan is Joe Biden. And just like you were saying there, Remso, I mean, one of the reasons Joe Biden has been so reluctant, I think, to drop out, not really Joe Biden, his family has been so reluctant to allow him to drop out, is because, they got to secure Hunter. They got to secure Jill. They got to secure also all of the shady dealings that have been happening for decades with the Biden crime syndicate. Those all have to stay hidden and under wraps. Otherwise, he's not gonna go. So maybe somehow there's been some deals made in the back room, but I don't know.
They're not just going free. They're gonna go to somebody because he tells them to, and I don't think we're gonna know that overnight.
Yeah, I don't know. I am just so shocked that they're potentially saying it's going to be an open convention, and maybe this Mark Halperin guy is full of shit. Whenever somebody gives like very specific reporting, most of the time they're full of shit because nobody knows all those details at this point in time. I doubt that's all been laid out.
On Saturday, on Saturday night after Trump was rushed to the hospital, there were reports that he had picked a female vice president. And up until last week, me and a bunch of other folks that are, surrounding ourselves in the world of dark and murky PAC work and everything, we thought that it was Doug Burgum. So it's a strange situation where I look at this and I'm just like, it's kind of like, this is a horrible example. It's kind of like Marvel Cinematic Universe movies the day before they come out, I always go on Wikipedia to spoil them for myself, and they're almost never accurate. So my thing is like, unless you actually see the movie play out, unless you actually see what happens from the horse's mouth, I tend to believe almost none of what I see.
Yeah, it's hard to believe anything you see. I mean, even things you see which are videos today, which, you know, you think video evidence, it's got to be real. I mean, things can be doctored up and they can, you know, take different angles to distort things and try to trick you. So you got to be skeptical of almost everything. And I want to pivot. We can always come back to Joe Biden, but I want to pivot right now to JD Vance, because you were talking about who. So initially, you know, it was floated after the shooting might be a female VP. And but I heard the same thing as you, because I heard it from Cliff Maloney when he was on the show, that it was going to be he thought it was going to be Doug Burgum, which shocked me at the time. But the betting markets kind of were tracking with that for a while as well. And then after the assassination attempt on President Trump, JD Vance just shot up. And I don't know who leaked it or who said it, but they said that the assassination attempt changed Trump's mind on who was going to be his vice president. So is that something that you've heard and something you buy into?
Yeah, I heard that it was an 11th hour decision on Saturday. You know, Vance was prepared for the possibility. He was told that he was on the short list as early as early June, but it was really like a come to Jesus moment for Trump, where he was just like, you know what, like if I have to do anything in my life, it's gonna be hardcore. And, you know, as I was telling Brian Nichols the other day, the tradition had always been, if you're going to choose a Reagan, you got to choose a George H.W. Bush. Or if you're going to choose, like, you know, a moderate progressive Republican a la, you know, Mitt Romney 2012, you got to pick a Paul Ryan that's giving some Tea Party platitudes. This is the most like bombastic ticket that we've ever had. And I say that in all the best ways, because you've got two very fiery populists that have brought in, you know, like the hood, the libertarians, like, you know, everyone from Hulk Hogan to 50 Cent to that, you know, Chris Lee's daughter from Bravo TV, as my wife has reminded me, she showed up at one point. You know, we're forming like the South Park Avengers of a GOP. And I've been seeing people saying that, oh no, my GOP is dead. The old GOP is dead. And I'm like, good. Rest in power, bitch.
Yes.
Because it never served us. It never did anything to serve us. And the only time that anything remotely positive came from a presidency, or nonetheless a party in my life, was during Donald Trump's presidency. Because the last 4 years, Republicans have only worked against the people. We've had a couple folks, and I mean, really, realistically, Rand Paul in the Senate, Thomas Massey in the Congress, like that's about it. But if we get Donald Trump back, I mean, how many times can you try and destroy a man's world? How many times can you try and destroy everything? And when he knows he's coming back into a like full-blown lame duck term where he can do whatever he wants and the consequences be damned, it's about to get fun.
It's about to get really fun. And this is a guy that almost died, like was an inch from dying. And obviously he realizes that. And I don't care who you are. I don't care how rich you are, what kind of life you've led. When that happens to you, when you have that near-death experience, it's going to change you. I mean, I guess it could change you for the worst. I think a lot of the time it ends up changing people for the better, as because they are so grateful that they do have some more time, and maybe they relook at their relationships and look at, you know, the vision for their life and their mission and what they want to accomplish. And I'm hopeful, like, we'll come back to JD Vance, but let's just stick with Trump for a minute here. I'm hopeful that we start to see that tonight in Trump's RNC address, that it's been talked about that he's changed his speech, that he's going to talk about unifying the country. I hope so. And I mean, of course, half the country is not going to be unified because they're psychotic, but there's a little bit of a fringe there, 1 or 2% that he probably could get over, which would be helpful.
John, are you voting for Trump?
Yeah, I'm in on Trump, man.
How wild is this? Because could you imagine either of us saying this like 10 years ago?
Dude, I said the last show I did after the assassination attempt, I had Brian Engelman on from the New American Media. I don't know if you know Brian, great guy. He's had that new American media for like more than 12 or 13 years. He was one of the first in the game with this alternative media stuff. And he's been on the Trump train for a while. And I told him, before that I was kind of hesitant. And then after the assassination attempt, I told him, I'm at the point that if somebody in my neighborhood is like, I'm thinking about voting for Trump, but I can't get there, I'll drive you there. Like that's where I am. Seriously.
It's like if you were going to vote for Trump hesitantly, you're going to vote for Trump harder. I mean, this is just that somebody said something very wise the other day that I was pondering on the shower. In my mind, I look like Batman brooding, but I was really just like, my wife was like, you've been there for a while. And I'm like, I'm thinking, but, a former mentor of mine said, you become a libertarian the day that you just want to be left alone, but you become something else when you realize they never will. And, from his first term where we saw some remarkable things, and he wasn't perfect, but he pushed us in a much better direction. He didn't just keep the needle still. He pushed it incrementally back towards an America that we could look at and be like, we're actually doing some pretty cool stuff. So then what happened during the lockdowns, where it was almost a plot against the president and everything else, to go from all of that to one term of Joe Biden, where it's been like Obama 3.0 on crack. I don't believe that I changed. And people said, well, you're contradicting yourself from not 16 years ago, from like 2016. And my thing is like, things change, people change. Ultimately, my values have completely stayed the same. I don't believe those have changed, but we're in a world where we can't play stupid games for stupid prizes. I did not attend the the third party debates at Freedom Fest on Friday night. I walked out because I'm like, why am I going to waste time?
What's
with
the point?
this? I'm not a child, and I'm not going to play children's games. And then to go from that to land home a few days before the RNC started, to see that a whacked out liberal tried to shoot Trump. It's like, this is different. This is absolutely different.
It's incredibly different. And, I think that the eye-opening time for me that started it was during COVID, when you realized, and now in hindsight, we know what happened. This was a government-created virus, which led to government lockdowns where you had every blue state locking down, destroyed the economy. I don't know how much of it was set up intentionally to try to take Trump out. Probably to some degree it was. Yeah.
I believe all of it was. And I mean, everything came down. I've got a funny story for you. I was supposed to be on Fox and Friends the other day. I was really excited. I got invited by a friend of mine who's on the Waukesha County School Board. He's a Republican stalwart. He's a cool millennial, conservative, libertarianish guy. So somebody I like, because I told him when I gave a donation and he was running, I'm like, you're one of the few non-retards here. I love you. And he took that to heart. So he was like, hey, be at this place at 5 a.m. tomorrow. Fox and Friends wants to interview people. We want to stack it with Republicans. They're going to ask you a couple questions. So I was thinking all day and all night, what are my answers going to be for the issues that matter to me? And as I was driving there, I was listening to the Braveheart soundtrack, and I was ready to say on Fox News, the issue that matters most to me is that Anthony Fauci needs to go to prison. He needs to go to prison for crimes against humanity. He lied about the gain of function research. He was creating a bioweapon. He lied about taxpayer money going through NIH to the Wuhan lab. He got caught on that. He got caught falsifying the CDC emails. He got caught by RFK when he was discussing what the coronavirus was supposed to be. He got called out by Rand Paul for everything. He lied about masking. He lied about the 6 feet social distancing. You want to unite the country, do a Nuremberg trial for Anthony Fauci and stick that man in prison. But like most things, as soon as I was prepared, they went to everybody else, and I was like, I have work in a couple of hours.
Yeah, and I want to address this comment here that just came in on YouTube saying about COVID, it happened on Trump's watch. And yes, COVID did happen on Trump's watch. Trump did not handle it well. I would like to think if something similar happened in Trump's second term, that he would handle it much better. But something to think about here. So I think people kind of forget. During COVID, Twitter was not owned by Elon Musk. Twitter was locked down. If you said anything that went out of line with the regime, you were off of Twitter. your account was, I mean, I was kicked off of Twitter for almost, I think, 3 months. My account was locked. Now think about with this assassination, how quickly the information's flowing. You're getting all kinds of different camera angles, and you have, people out there doing, real journalism, people, just regular people who are breaking this down. 4 years ago, that would not have happened. So we have a total, just by Twitter being a free marketplace of ideas where there's, almost complete freedom of speech. Of course, not entirely freedom of speech, because Elon does not allow some things. You could argue about that, but that's really not the point. The point is we have such a larger degree of freedom in the social media space where we can actually push back against these narratives, which we didn't have during COVID. Imagine if during COVID, Robert Malone and Peter McCullough weren't, throttled or kicked off, and Joe Rogan wasn't suppressed. It's just different time. It's just totally different time.
Well, some of us tried. And the joke that I made is that Parler had to die so that X could live. And, I joke with people. It's like I was nobody, and I still consider myself. I'm just a regular person. I've never, I've done a lot of cool stuff, and I've had some big flashing moments. But after the events of the 2020 election and the lockdowns and all the January 6th hysteria and everything, I was on people were telling me, like, you're being watched. Take 2 seconds to guess who's watching me. I had the media following me everywhere. I couldn't go on my personal Instagram. They were reaching out to, my girlfriend, my now wife. I mean, I had my family to think about. I was still living back in Virginia, and I was basically running around the country trying to stay as low profile as possible, because they were just going after everybody. They wouldn't let me live peacefully. And I joke that it's like, folks, I didn't go to Wisconsin because I love the weather here and all 2 seasons, 2 months of summer and, 10 months of, winter. But, I tried to live as peaceful as a life. And I was like, man, I was scared. Like I got away with, my life, and I got away with my sanity. And it took years. I mean, the lockdowns in Virginia were absolutely devastating. And to have everything that went on with Parler afterwards, I question whether I would ever work again or do anything. And for the past 4 years, I've been quiet. For the past 4 years, I was like, I need to step out of it. Let somebody else take the slings and arrows. But, when they tried to shoot my boy Saturday, that kind of pissed me off. And I'm like, you know what? If you don't like me now, you're certainly not going to like me for the rest of the year, because these people need to be held accountable. We need to be screaming from the streets. And I'm not saying that crackhead, mayor, congresswoman who was like, you need to go find everybody and yell.
Well, there are crackhead mayors. So,
yeah, there are crackhead mayors. She's that congresswoman from California who's like, you need to go find people from that administration and yell at them. I'm not saying do that, but at least in a peaceful way, in a way that's not like harassing people. Call them out. Take every opportunity. If you see a single reporter and they ask you your thoughts on anything, tell them that Trump is right. Tell them that Fauci needs to be in prison, that Joe Biden has dementia, that Kamala Harris got to where she is by giving blowjobs to mayors, that this whole thing is rigged, and that CNN lies. We shouldn't be playing with them. We shouldn't be pretending that they're cooperative. We shouldn't be pretending that they have good intentions. We shouldn't be pretending that if you die at a rally because a psycho started shooting at people, that they're not going to say that it was your fault that you were there in the first place and that you died. That's the people we live with. They don't have good intentions. They don't care about you, and they will destroy your life and still go to dinner by 7 and be in bed by 9, and they won't sweat a second.
And they are the ones that cannot relate to the real, working class in America, to the blue collar workers, to the, to poor people. Like you talked about in the article that you wrote most recently, which I think it's the first article you've written in a little bit of time, but I mean, you haven't lost your knack for writing, Remso. This appeared on, how do you say that? AMP America? Is that right? AMP America. Yep. It's titled "In JD Vance, I See Myself," and Let's talk about this, Remso. What motivated you to write this article? You know, when you saw JD Vance was the nominee, what were your feelings initially?
You know, I thought he was too good to be even on the short list. I thought that it was a lot of wishful thinking. You know, I had some wild ideas too. I thought he'd pull out Tulsi Gabbard or RFK for like a unity ticket, and then I thought, you know, he's going to go ahead and give like a George H.W. Bush platitude, and you know, pick a Doug Burgum, who's a moderate Republican. And when I saw Vance, you know, was the VP pick, I was like, holy shit, like Donald Trump is not messing around. But more importantly, he picked somebody that the left can't really go after for the things that they go after everyone else. They're going to say that he's stupid. And it's like, I'm sorry, the man went to Yale. They're going to call him a white supremacist. It's like, I'm sorry, he has 3 children with his Indian wife. They're going to say that he wants to like ruin things for blue collar America. It's like he grew up in a destitute mining town in Ohio. His mom was addicted to drugs and he was raised by his grandmother because his dad fled the scene early. You know, they're going to say that he wants to make things harder for the troops. It's like he was a Marine that served in Iraq. It's like he is the Teflon candidate, and they'll go ahead and throw out everything they can like they've been trying, but it just, it hits his chest and it falls straight off. I first learned about him because I was an intern at the American Conservative in 2017. And in the DC office of the editorial room, they had a bunch of copies because, longtime tech columnist Rob Dreher reviewed his book and really took a liking to JD Vance and got him hooked up to the media. And quickly, Hillbilly Elegy became a huge book a year prior from when I had first read it in around 2016. And what it did was it really showed people from a non-political view, a non-real agenda view, what life is like for a good chunk of the country. And, you know, I called myself, I still call myself here, I'm like the East Coast elitist because I lived in Virginia for 10 years and I worked in DC. And, you know, I went to all the Cato parties and cocktail hours and all the heritage panels and stuff like that. I was a stuffy, think tank libertarian as it came. And, it wasn't until I joined the Army and served in the Alabama National Guard in a town called Marion, right outside Selma, that for the first time in my life, it's like, oh my gosh, like there are poor white people here. And when I mean poor, I mean po. Like they need to take a loan out to piss. And it was just really strange. And I talk about this a lot in my first book, Stay Away from the Libertarians, which talked about the modern libertarian movement and why people ignore them at their own peril. But I talk a little bit about the civil rights movement. And, something I even touched on back then, and that book came out in 2018. It's that, people, is there a racial tinge to things? There is, just because of the culture and the history. But, in Alabama, at least, they're united by, Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide. Like, the other than that, what's their uniting force? It's God and poverty. And that's the thing. I touched a little bit on that in my second book, How to Succeed in Politics and Other Forms of Devil Worship. It's like, poor white people and poor black people, they don't have beef with each other. They really don't. And I think for a lot of people in America, it's like, if you want to make an argument about what separates people, I do not believe that it's race. And I don't believe it's ever really been race. I think it's been class. And I think it's about working people who look around at the country and they look around at the world and they don't feel like they're part of it. The culture here in the Midwest, since I moved to Wisconsin, has humbled me because, my problems are nothing compared to a lot of people here in Wisconsin. I think the median income is around 60K. More than half of the population here, they don't have a passport. They don't have a college education. And where are all the secure jobs? They're in the unions. They're in the pipe layers unions, the labor unions. They're in the electricians union and stuff like that. Like, this is where the Obama Trump voter lives, because ultimately people just want to live their lives and they just want to, make a living and feed their family and be able to live in a nice place. And as things have gotten more difficult, that is going away for people. And I think that Republicans have completely forgotten that, because you have the Koch types that would rather just flood this country with cheap labor at the expense of other people. I mean, something I've had to come to terms with is that, free market economies are great, but economies should serve the people there, they're more than just self-sustained economic hubs, their culture, their language, their shared identity.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you're not serving that, you're going to get the problems we have today. And the Democrats who used to be for the working man, they've completely sold out because it's become cronyism. It's become all these other things that don't help people because your dollar can't help you. Your taxes aren't going towards you. They're going to Ukraine instead of helping your school. They're going to all this other shit instead of helping you. The biggest thing that I remember from, the COVID days was the stimulus spending that they did, where they went ahead and gave money to the Kennedy Center. And they went ahead and, they gave everyone like a few $1,000 if you qualified. But other than that, what did it do? It inflated the money supply, and they made sure they benefited first. And, we felt good for 5 minutes, and we're still feeling the repercussions of that. Neither party has served people. And I say that to the extent of JD Vance is the only person who looks like a normal human being. He gets it. He was successful before he got in politics. The fact that he even ran for Senate was pretty freaking wild. The fact that he won in Ohio as a pretty stalwart conservative populist was also pretty wild. And the fact that in that short amount of time, now he is going to be the vice presidential pick for Donald Trump. He's the most normal motherfucker who's ever been in this position.
Yeah, I was just doing a Google search here. Maybe you know the answer to this. Did JD Vance go to law school with Vivek Ramaswamy?
They had 200 people in their law school, and it was JD Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy. I think they were the class of 2008 at Yale.
That's crazy.
Wild world. Oh, and by the way, his third son, Vance's youngest son, his name is Vivek.
Really?
Yep.
So they're actually actually tight. That's pretty cool.
Wild, right?
Because I was going to say, other than Vance, Vivek would have been, my number one choice as a VP for Trump. Obviously, Trump was never going to pick Vivek just from like a branding standpoint. You think Trump's talking, you can't have the signs with Trump, Ramaswamy, it's too long, or Trump, Vivek, it makes no sense. But I don't know what that accent is, but that's how Trump thinks, though. He's like, oh, Vance is close to Pence, and people like to say that. And so he's thinking about it from that angle.
Yeah, Robert Greene's rule of power, the first rule of power is don't outshine the master. And, I think Vance can be pulled out when need be, but he's not going to upstage Trump. And I think the problem with Ramaswamy is that he would have outstaged Trump.
He's too much. And he's not as charismatic as Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is the most charismatic person in the world. But he is up there. He's one of those people who walks in a room that everyone turns and is attracted to him. And yeah, like you said, it's rare to see that type of pairing in a president and then a vice president to an equal. Normally you get the Barack Obama, Joe Biden. It's kind of rare that you get someone like Joe Biden, who is such a dull vice president, to become a president. But
yeah, I mean, even Barry Goldwater, he got a guy, I don't remember, his name was like Arthur Miller or George Miller, but like Miller was a senator who Goldwater didn't even want as his VP. He went into the 1964 Republican convention without a VP declared, and Miller was chosen by the delegates. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't get excited over politicians. I don't try and do the hero worship thing. I've definitely seen the perils of that before. But, like I say, I meant it very deliberately when I'm like, when I see JD Vance, I see myself, because, Vance served in the military. I served in the military. Vance saw the difference growing up throughout his life between extreme poverty and the highest echelon of American society. Like, I'm from a small border town in Arizona, and I grew up to live, in the Gilded City in Washington, D.C., and I've seen everything in between. Like, my wife is, Irish German. My family's a bit more eclectic. I'm Puerto Rican Korean, and somehow, one generation through, and I'm a Protestant Republican. Like, I don't know how it works, but it does somehow. And
party of diversity, Remso.
Party of diversity. And it's like, for the first time, it's like, I'm glad the old Republican Party is gone, because it had nothing to do with me. And when I see Vance, it's like, he might be a white hillbilly from Ohio, but I have more in common with that man than I have anybody else there. And I think for a lot of Americans, when I'm seeing people attack him, it's going to be almost like what happened with Trump in 2016. It's like, oh, well, you're voting for Trump because you're stupid. What does that do? Those people are going to be like, yeah, well, now I was thinking of maybe not showing up, but now I'm definitely going to show up. The more they call him stupid, the more they call him white trash, the more they go ahead and call him all these things. It's going to mobilize all these working people across the country to show up and vote for the Trump Vance ticket, because it's not that even that they necessarily like them. I would argue that it's that they're tired of being attacked themselves.
It's almost like the same feeling that opposed Barack Obama when he said that, I think he was referring to people in like central Pennsylvania, and maybe he was talking about Kentucky, same thing, who cling to their guns and their Bibles.
Oh, the bitter clingers.
Yeah. So it's that type of feeling, and I think it's almost like a perfect storm where you had the assassination attempt, and really, no matter how you look at it, if you're looking at it like maybe this was an inside job, I don't think we know enough to know that right now. But just looking at it from the sheer incompetence of the Secret Service, of the government in protecting a former president, and just what a clown show it was. I think that sort of galvanizes people around like, whoa, this has really gotten bad. Like, this is like, we got to change something here. So, I mean, I don't know if that's not going to bring like your, diehard, dyed in the wool blue Joe Biden supporter, Kamala Harris supporter, John Fetterman, I'll vote for anyone with the blue, even if they can't speak, Democrat supporter, over to Donald Trump. But it'll bring over your moderates, maybe some of these men out there who voted for Joe Biden because their wife was nagging them to vote for Joe in 2020. I think they'll say, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll vote for," and then they'll vote for Trump. I think we'll see some of that type of change.
I mean, people are just forgetting that over a month ago, the indictment brought him a whole wave of support, and a lot of big money started dumping into Trump's campaign and the PACs. Once they maxed their donation, then they started putting money into super PACs. I mean, for once, Republican super PACs are actually flush with cash, which is hilarious because they used to fall behind on that so much. But the indictment, I mean, up until that point, I was still very much like, I want to see RFK on the debate stage. I want to see RFK call Trump out over the lockdowns and everything else. Would I have voted for RFK? At that point, I was considering it. But when they tried to throw him in prison, that was one of those things where I'm like, listen, like everything aside, like this is the tagline that a lot of people has been saying is, propaganda and everything else is that they're not going after Trump. They're going after you, and he's in the way. It's kind of gimmicky, but in a way I'm looking at that. And, for me, like remembering what they tried to do with people at Parler, what they tried to do with people for a lot of other things. I mean, very close friends of mine who were political opponents of the regime had charges and all this other stuff brought on from them because they were just, political threats. They tried to put them in jail. The fact that they're trying to do that to Donald Trump was absolutely insane. So at that point, I was on a plane to Las Vegas with my wife. And at that point, I was like on the plane, I'm looking at this on the Wi-Fi. I'm like, okay, like we're done messing around. We got to register in Wisconsin because I also have not voted in 4 years. I'm like, we got to register to vote. We're in a battleground state and we're voting for Trump. And with this over this weekend, I'm like, oh my gosh, like we can't play around. The fact that there are people who have lived through everything we have and have seen everything with their own eyes that we have, who are still considering, especially in battleground states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, somebody put Florida up in play. And I think that's
Virginia's now back in play.
Like, if you're still like, voting for these third parties and everything else, especially in battleground states, you might as well just show up and vote for Biden. Now that contradicts what I've said in the past, which is your vote is your vote and it's sacred and it's holy. Now I'm looking at it like if you're doing that now, like, I don't know what to say to you. Like, you're not a serious person. This has gone beyond our worst nightmares. This is an American nightmare. And, to kind of loop it together, when I see JD Vance on that stage, you know what I see? I see an end to the war in Ukraine. I see an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I see that they're finally going to try and, repeal the income tax of all things. Like, come on, people. Like, freaking look at this. We have gone so far from where we were 10 years ago, or even going farther back to 2012, to them basically adopting a good chunk of Ron Paul's platform, and it's not good enough for you. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, it's the purists who the holier than thou, the condescending type libertarians who, in order to even have a conversation with someone, you have to agree with them on every single last principle. I've just had it with those type of people. I can't have those conversations. Like when they start on Twitter, when somebody who I know from my previous life in the Libertarian Party starts nipping at my heels, picking at something I say, I don't have any interest in engaging with you about that and talking about let's get down to the philosophical level of this. And sure, that's important. And yeah, that built me up over years and years as I learned about my political beliefs. But at the end of the day, that shit doesn't win in politics, and you have to have power in order to influence politics in your favor. And if you're not willing to do some dirty work, which might include voting for someone who you don't align with 100%, then you're never going to gain anything. You're never going to win anything.
The biggest problem with libertarians is that they refuse to admit that people can hear them, people can understand them, and people can be as educated as them and still come to different conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about this country, and I bring it up a lot in this piece, is we're a huge country. We're a huge country, and it's impossible to get anyone 100% on board. So if we're not going to be able to completely agree with each other, we might as well respect each other. And I wish libertarians understood that, we live in a country of people who are different than us. And the goal is not to constantly change their minds. The goal is to find a way to live with each other peacefully that advances our own free will and allows us to experience America the way that we were supposed to. Because the thing, and this has been a criticism of mine for years. And, I sound like a boomer when I say it, but like, I genuinely feel that people don't like this country anymore. I say this as a veteran. I say this as an entrepreneur. I say this as somebody that, dealt with all the stuff in our nation's capital and media and everything that I've done. It's like, I genuinely don't know if a lot of people like this country. And my thing is like, it's not perfect, but you look at the scoreboard for every horrible thing that we've done historically, we've pivoted pretty freaking fast through all the worst things we've done. We've kind of backtracked as much as we often could to try and rectify it. Like if we're anything, we're a country that overshares our problems. And my thing is like, if we can just agree that, a lot of what we're seeing and even what's happening with Biden right now, it's undemocratic, it's un-American.
Yeah.
He is the nominee of his party. I just want people like this country again. I just want people to come together for that. Damn it.
How crazy is that? Going back to Biden, we're going full circle on this show as we wrap up. Going back to Biden again. So their whole campaign has been Donald Trump's going to be a dictator on day one. It's the end of democracy if he gets reelected, which never made any sense. And yet, this is the party that if Joe Biden does indeed step away this weekend, or if you're listening to this on Monday, maybe it already happened. If he does step to the side, they are usurping all the people who voted for them. That's just crazy, man. Like, and Joe Biden even pointed that out. Was that like last Sunday or Saturday when he didn't write it, but his people wrote an open letter, essentially making the threat that, if you guys do this, if you guys force me out, you're basically going against everything we've been saying, that we're standing for democracy. It's just like, you could not write this stuff. It's insane.
No, this feels like, this feels like we're all in a freaking movie. I mean, I feel, and this is weird. Okay. Like I feel almost like how we felt during COVID, where it's like, okay, you guys are witnessing all of this too, right?
But I feel a lot more positive though. Do you feel that? Like during COVID, I was like, oh shit, this is going to get a lot worse. Now I feel like we're moving in a better direction.
What made me really happy, and like I've been enjoying watching this RNC. This has been fun. what made me feel really happy was those UNC frat boys. If we learned anything from the lockdowns, it's that the nerds were the bad guys all along, and their Hollywood propaganda attacking the jocks and the gym bros and the frat boys has come to an end. Because when it came to showing who has basic decency and who respects this country and rule of law and who we are as a people, it's the frat boys. And when they brought them in, and they talked about how they made sure the flag did not fall down at the UNC Chapel Hill campus as all those raging intifada communists were trying to tear it down. That gave me hope. That's like, you know what? Like, we have to fight these battles so that our next generation can actually figure things out. I'm not a father, John, but I'm at a point in my life. Like, look at me. My hairline is getting kind of squiggly. I've got a wedding band. Like, for people that have paid attention, and I have counted, I am Lions of Liberty's most frequent guest across all 3 shows historically. So I wear that with pride.
I believe it.
You know, it is a situation where I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, when I have a family, what is the America I want to leave them? And I know it'll be different. I know it'll probably be a little bit scary, but I want my posterity to have a chance. And when I look at other people's kids who are way younger, who have just that basic understanding of what it is to be an American, I don't know those kids' politics. But sadly, we're at a point where, you know, not defacing the American flag because you're supporting a terrorist organization and shit like that shows you your political boundaries. Seeing those boys on stage gave me hope. And seeing JD Vance as the VP pick, and I was already pretty much going to vote for Trump, it shows me that America's turning back and that, you know, I believe we can make this country not just great again, but, you know, make it a fun, awesome place to live. We're never going to be perfect, but we are as perfect as it's going to get for many things. And I want to look back at this period and say, yeah, that was some shit, but we got through it. We survived the nightmare.
Yeah, let's make it fun to live here again. Let's make, you know, our day-to-day life in America, our social interactions fun again. You know, let's look out for each other and not, you know, look for opportunities to put each other down. Like, it's just like the past 4 years, it's like everyone's walking on eggshells, and you have to say the right thing. And if you
have to put the pronouns.
You might say the wrong pronouns. I mean, let's just relax, people. Let's just start having fun. And I don't know. Let's make America great again. There, I said
America great again.
Remso Martinez, where can people find you? Where can they, you know, get all the marketing services and everything else that you offer?
Well, I run a humble marketing agency out here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So people can go ahead and find me at marketerontherun.com. I work with great people. But, you know, if you want to catch more of my hijinks and everything else that's going on, especially as my wife put it, political Remso is back. And I don't know whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, but I'll take it. You know, go ahead and follow me on Instagram at Go Remso. That's GOREMSO for podcast listeners. Or you can find me on X at Hey Remso. That's HEYREMSO.
All right, Remso Martinez, thank you for coming back again, for being, once again, the most frequent guest on the Lions of Liberty Network.
Appreciate it, buddy. John. Take care.
All right, that is a wrap for today. Hope you all enjoyed that. You know, it's kind of crazy releasing an episode at any point in time during this election craziness. But I'm sure by the time a lot of people hear this on Monday, things will have changed. Maybe Joe Biden decided he's not going to drop out. Maybe we know some crazy evidence about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump that we don't know right now on Thursday, July 18th. But anyway, that's what podcasting is. Hopefully, this podcast was still entertaining. Hopefully, you still enjoyed it, even if all this information is now changed by the time you listen to it. And if you're listening now still at this point in time, you probably like us. And if you like us, that means you should probably become a Patreon. You can join by going to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals.com. If you're a regular person and you don't type in URLs, just go to Patreon or Locals and type in Lions of Liberty in the search, and it'll pop right up. We'd love to have you in the Lions of Liberty Pride. With that being said, guys, I'm about ready to go on vacation. I'm excited for that, but I'll be back next week with another awesome episode. In the meantime, always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.